What do you think is your input into how to lead the culture of tourism, of guest experience in a way that is visionary?
Wow, that's a big question. I would say we're very lucky to be somewhere so special in Bali where the hospitality is so ingrained, and I think the secret is sometimes get out of the way and listen to traditional wisdom, people that have been here and people that have built Bali, like the Balinese,
Correct.
who have the most natural hospitality ever. So for us, the biggest thing is just return to that spirit, original spirit of Bali.
That reminds me of something that I've been hearing a lot actually on perhaps chefs say, just respect the ingredient and don't mess up the ingredient, you create a frame around it.
Most important ingredient is the people.
This is William Goldfarb. He's one of the most famous and most accomplished chefs in the world, and he happens to have a restaurant called Room for Dessert in Ubud. Will is on Netflix on the Chef's Table program for being one of the most remarkable entrepreneurs, hailing from New York. Will touches upon some really good wisdom here with this idea of, as an entrepreneur and as a foreigner, sometimes we need to go back to the basics. Sometimes we need to understand a little bit more about how the Balinese actually get things done. Welcome to this episode of the Bali Business Review, where we look at traditional practices in Bali that are actually in harmony with nature, with people, and we'll take a look at some modern day interpretations of how to blend a harmonious balance between development, capitalism, business, and nature. Welcome to this new episode of Bali Business Review.
With so many hotels in Bali, why have I chosen to begin this episode here? Because Sanur, for those of you who don't know, Sonora ironically used to be one of the most leading cutting-edge design foundational regions of Bali that led to the proliferation of Bali as an international destination around the world. How did that happen? Well, it all comes back to the common word that I think is the root of all success here in Bali, which comes down to culture. Culture for the correct architecture, style, and design that then led to the proliferation of the tourism industry to an international audience of sophisticated travelers in the jet set 1950s actually emerged right here on the beaches here in Sanur. Let me bring you to the place where I think it all began. This is not just your average hotel. This is what I would call the seed of a large hotel movement that then blossomed all over Bali. So this initial seed was a founder, a pioneer in fact, created a culture around what would be now known as modern Balinese architecture. One of the leading projects at the time Indonesia was first becoming a nation was the Bali Beach Hotel, which has been rechristened these days and is still in Sanur. The concept was to build a 10-story Miami-style hotel that the president of Indonesia at the time, Sukarno, thought would be a good way to jumpstart and activate the tourism industry. Some of the people working on the project of this hotel decided that 10-story modern hotels in the Art Deco aesthetic was not for them. In fact, they found it repulsive, in fact, and they preferred to stay actually at the home of a local person, a so-called Wia Wawarunto. Wia Wawarunto had a small little bungalow that was on the beaches of Sanur, and he designed it to look very, very Balinese. He used coral stones, he used the design vernacular that was respectful of traditions, and himself being of Dutch origin, Dutch and Indonesian origin, he started this place right here. It's called Tanjung Sari. Tanjung Sari is a very special hotel amongst all the modern and, let's say, more impressive options here on the beach and all throughout Bali, but it's a small boutique hotel. And the reason it's special is it seeded a design vernacular for Balinese architecture for the tourism industry. So early founders back in the day, in the early days, would sit at this bar over here. This is the Tanjung Sari bar. You'd have names like Donald Friend, Wira Wawarunto, Adrian Zecca, all who would later on become impressive architectural and hospitality founders in their own right, that essentially got together to that bar to discuss about ideas about how to progress and forward the movement in architecture. Later on, these ideas got incorporated into the designs for major five-star hotels throughout Bali. But the Tanjung Sari was probably the most hip and happening hotel, hosting the likes of Mick Jagger, Yoko Ono, and all the rock star celebrities. There's too many to count, but here's a list of names. showing who they were. So celebrities would gather here in this particular hotel because of its unique Southeast Asian character and design, and they would do such mundane things as taking a phone call, because back in the 1950s there weren't a lot of phone lines around in Bali. Actually, in fact, there's still no phone lines in Bali if I think about it. Most people use mobile phone technology now. So this location became the center stage, the centerpiece of design and architectural conversations that then proliferated and became the pioneers for brands that would later emerge, such as Grounds Kent, such as Kerry Hill, such as Aman, such as all these different hospitality brands that took the allure and the deep traditions of Balinese culture and globalized them all throughout the rest of the world. So this little place is much more than, I would just say, a hotel. And so this idea of using more ecologically sound materials in order to build a better Bali can be studied up close and personal here in Sonora. This is the bamboo bar, and I think it's a pretty good example of how one can use bamboo and natural materials in order to achieve a sustainable look, but also once again employ the principle of being Tri Hita Karana compliant. The one really impactful idea that I can take away with anybody who watches the show, hopefully, is that these principles are pretty simple. The Balinese call it Tri Hita Karana. It means harmony with nature, harmony with God, and harmony with your fellow human being. And what is the benefit of using bamboo? Well, there's many, but I would say the easiest one to think about is that it's a renewable resource and it doesn't require any large carbon footprint to bring it on site. You're keeping Balinese artisans employed by allowing this type of joinery and these types of craftsmanship and artisanship to continue through culture. Bamboo does have certain drawbacks. If it's untreated, it will rot, it will have negative performance in terms of its ability to sustain as material. However, that can be done with some simple coatings, technologies, and also some processing that brings and strengthens the product. So the impact of using bamboo, I think, as also a new futuristic material, falls under this overall umbrella idea of eco-tech shamanism. The principal idea behind it is how can you fuse a vision of the future together with a vision of the past. And if we take a close-up at some of these joins and some of these detailed craftsmanship in this bamboo structure, we'll be able to find probably some traditional wisdom. This is how Balinese statues are made. They're hand-carved, actually. So you can see the process behind me here. These two artisans carve it out, each carving at a time. That's incredible. Look. And I guess this is what it looks like before it's finished. It's a very rough hewn. It's got the main idea, I guess, and it's surprisingly, I asked the two artisans what they were doing and how they learned, and they learned right here. They actually have a little workshop here that carves statues, and everybody, it's funny, this bathtub here, but everybody in the village already knows that this is the kind of work they do, which is really fascinating here in the village, right? So it means this entire temple has access to a skilled decorator that just works behind us. Fascinating. Here's an example of something that I think gets the idea correct. So this is a tree bar here at the Maya Sanur, and what's cool about it is that the tree is preserved rather than being cut down to form the actual bar itself. You can see the canopy area and the higher ups, which is pretty cool. Nature is preserved and allowed to integrate into the architecture. It gives it a more presence, gives it a timeless quality that is oftentimes hard to find in places where they're brand new, in fact. So as you can see, this design also respects this preservation of this nature that is around us. And I think that's important because according to a lot of Balinese animist philosophy, there are spirits within trees, and these spirits are essentially what's safeguarding us in terms of air and livelihood, and it's just good to be on good terms with these local traditions, I think. Now, I'd like to show you a really interesting feature that this hotel has actually designed in order to reduce overall electricity output, increase the greenery, produce fresh oxygen, and it doesn't require a huge budget to do either. I think it's just simple common sense. Here, we have to walk up some stairs over here to get there because it's on the roof. Let's go up to the roof. We've reached the top here. The roof of the hotel is laid out with green grass and landscaping, giving I guess an aesthetic of hanging gardens of Babylon, perhaps, if you're familiar with that ancient world wonder reference. So these bougainvillea are very water conservative and low impact grass for moisture, and this entire roof line extends into a green park all the way over to the front of the hotel, which I think is beautiful. It almost incorporates a majestic feeling of being on a mountaintop here while being in actually the beach. Let's take a look at some of these air chillers over here. These are definitely coolers that are used to remove heat from air conditioning and such. What is it that makes this roof smart? And roofs designed like this can be easily implemented across many different buildings in Bali to give a much better, how would I put the right word, footprint? These are basically solar energy absorbers all around the rooftop. This garden soaks up all the heat, and instead of then having the temperature of your building get hotter and hotter and hotter throughout the day, they shield the building from heat and thus reduce also the very expensive and wasteful electricity process of cooling down the rest of the building. Our rooftop gardens can be easily implemented in many flat roof white Mediterranean villas these days to lend a beautiful aesthetic, energy cost low, by draping the building with this beautiful vegetation, and also be very much in line with the Balinese principle of Tri Hita Karana, harmony between humans and nature. I've been trying to unify all the different cultures that are here in Bali, and I found inspiration in Tri Hita Karana, which I'm sure you've heard of before, like this idea of harmony with people, harmony with nature, harmony with the divine. Do you think that that can be a shared value that everybody who is approaching, let's say capitalism or whatever growth we're seeing, can that be where we all converge on? We all agree that that is what we should try to do. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, now we're going really deep, but
yeah,
I mean, ultimately, I believe it's essentially a spiritual problem, right?
If
you see yourself as a limited being having a limited moment, and the only thing that matters is yourself, which is also an illusion, right?
Right.
We only exist as an idea,
right?
And a body that dies. In a physical sense. So we have to start thinking about it on a spiritual level, and that's, I think, where the values come in. So Tri Hita, I think, is a great traditional example of how the Balinese have really connected, God, man, and nature, and seeing that they have a role to play in the ecosystem. And so I think, especially as a foreigner, it's about creating things that are in line with that. Yeah, I mean, somebody who's come in as an outsider into the culture, it's really important that we do things, even if they're creative and new, we do things to really honor the island.
Correct.
And improve the island, and not turn the island into like a placeless urban, scape of, I mean, if you go to a lot of parts of Bali now, you could blindfold somebody and kidnap them from Miami and put them in a villa in certain parts of Bali, and they wouldn't know where they were. They wouldn't know it was Bali until maybe they'd have to find a warung or something to figure it out. So I think it's really so I think it's really important that we definitely on a spiritual level, whatever faith or background you come from, I think the sustainability conversation really does actually eventually boil down to, do you believe you're a spiritual being that is innately good and here to make a good impact, or do you believe that you don't have any real meaning, and it all doesn't matter, and if the world ends tomorrow, who cares? And
you shouldn't come to Bali and build if you believe that.
Well, I mean, it's these things are, you don't really know what people believe, and we're not here to judge other people, but from a sustainability point of view, I really think that's if you want to get down to it, you want to get down to values, it's like, how do we make sure we're doing good things?
Correct. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Warren, for
you're very welcome.
For putting this foundational down. Yeah. Once again, our motivation here is to help everyone converge on like a common vision, such that we don't need to repeat mistakes that we've had. I think where development was taking away, I think, from a experience that nobody really wanted to converge to, but just nobody was putting an anchor down what the vision should be. Okay, thank you.